Story 1. Hot take. Well-intentioned politician. You have lots of power in theory, but most things are either very complex or very corrupt. People elect you based on unrealistic expectations and will turn on you the moment you do not deliver. Story 2. Every profession is harder than people who have never worked in that profession think it is. Everyone. Story 3. Every blue-collar job in the world is important. Those people should be appreciated, especially if they work in suboptimal temperatures both indoors and outdoors. Story 4. Animals can be challenging. I am a veterinary technician, and while puppies and kittens are adorable, I have to collect blood from their tiny veins before we proceed with anesthesia. Story 5. Package handlers do much more than just throwing boxes. They have to memorize dozens of route numbers and zip codes, work in extreme temperatures with no air conditioning and inadequate heating, and lift items that weigh up to 150 pounds, all while being yelled at to work faster. It is hard work. There is a reason half of the new employees quit in their first week. Story 6. Auto detailing. People upset me when they say I can get my 10-year-old to do this. Okay, fine. Do not call me when they damage your electrical system. Story 7. Retail seems simple in theory. The challenge comes from handling entitled or rude customers and managers who do not allow you to take your breaks. Story 8. I sincerely think fast food employees work harder on a day-to-day basis than most office workers, and certainly much harder than I ever had to work as a doctor or philosophy student. Not that people tend to think that is actually work anyway. Story 9. Gardening is not just cutting the grass and trimming tree branches. You need to have knowledge about plants and their care, as well as treatments for each type. It is important to understand plumbing to install irrigation systems and sometimes masonry to repair tiles near trees. Taking courses is necessary to operate machinery safely. Story 10. I'm a firm believer that all professions are fairly evenly hard, just along very different dimensions. There is physically hard work, such as construction workers, laborers, movers, and farmers. There is intellectually hard work, including scientists, developers, and doctors. There is interpersonally hard work, like salespeople, managers, and teachers. There are all sorts of different dimensions that make each job its own level of difficulty. I don't think I can look at one specific job and think it is easy. The only question is whether the skills I excel at align with the challenges the job demands. Story 11. Basically everything. Every job looks easy until you have to do it or acquire the knowledge to be able to do it. Story 12. Any customer-facing job, even really simple tasks, becomes a nightmare when you involve customers. People like to criticize Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez because she was a bartender, as if it is a job for simpletons. I bet most of them would not last a day as a bartender unless the bar only sold one type of beer and had no more than 2 customers an hour. Story 13. Truck driving is not just sitting all day, and many people cannot handle it mentally. Story 14. There's a sign spinner who appears to be in his 40s and has been working near me for years. I respect that person deeply. He is out there every day, regardless of the heat, always bouncing, spinning, and dancing. I could not keep up that pace for more than 20 minutes, and I am in good shape for my age. Story 15. Becoming a veterinarian means entering the profession because you love animals, but it often involves seeing them suffering and having to euthanize them. Story 16. Caretaking for individuals with special needs requires a certain level of patience and understanding, especially when they may react with aggression. Story 17. Pharmacy technician. People spend hours waiting for a doctor and expect prescriptions to be ready in less than 15 minutes. We do more than just count pills. Our responsibilities include answering phones, serving customers at the counter and drive-thru, calling patients to remind them to pick up their prescriptions, scheduling vaccines, faxing doctors for refills, contacting patients when doctors do not respond to refill requests, resolving insurance issues, requesting prior authorizations, typing prescriptions, putting away medications, checking for expired pills monthly, removing prescriptions not picked up, enrolling patients in various services, listening to customers give reasons for early opioid refills, and assisting with GoodRx or other similar programs. These are just some of the tasks we handle. Story 18. Remember how retail employees became essential personnel during the coronavirus disease? That should sufficiently answer this question. Story 19. Police officer. Most people have incorrect preconceived ideas about your political affiliations, ideology, and reasons for entering the profession. Many think you are out to get them, have no discretion, and only want to arrest people. There is significant liability, long hours, and it is hard on the family. There is more paperwork than anyone cares to admit. And at the end of the day, you may experience some post-traumatic stress disorder unless you take care of your mental health. I will be issuing traffic warnings for the rest of the day unless I am called to a neighbor dispute over a fence. Story 20. Court reporting involves listening to and writing phonetically on a machine with these keys: STKPWH or AOEUF or PBLGTSDZ, in this fixed order, every single word in court, then reproducing it as typewritten text or dictating it for a typist to transcribe, then proofreading all content, averaging 50,000 words per day, in my case for 40 years. Topics ranged from medical malpractice to jojoba bean farming, divorce proceedings, every crime known to man, and every subject imaginable passing through the court system. I rest my case. Story 21. Private detective or investigator. Private investigators need to be extremely careful about how they conduct investigations since they do not have law enforcement authority. Story 22. Registered nurse. Short-staffed hospitals are challenging, but the emergency room is nursing on the worst day of everyone's life. Story 23. Preschool teachers. I made it 3 days before I walked out. I was just an assistant and told someone I was leaving. Those 3 days of barely any sleep, getting kicked and punched, and being picked on made me gain a new respect for preschool teachers. Children, while I can forgive their behavior, are sometimes difficult when their parents are not around. Story 24. Software. Depending on the company and the team, it can be a world of unrealistic expectations, constantly moving goalposts, and learning new technologies only to have a senior tell you that you did it all wrong. Nepotism, awkward and antisocial coworker dynamics, and constant mental overload at 110% make it very mentally draining and demoralizing. At the end of the day, nothing valuable gets done. Or you can be lucky and show up to meetings, barely doing anything. It's really hit or miss, but when it's intense, it's intense. Story 25. People who work in grocery stores stand on hard floors all day dealing with people who have only first world problems. Why are you always out of this? First of all, these items are not mine and I do not know. Go grow it yourself. Story 26. Teaching requires skill, focus, presence, and composure. Most people cannot do it well. Story 27. Anybody can take pictures. However, being a professional photographer requires significantly more creativity and technical expertise, and it can be far from glamorous. Story 28. Social services involving children and working in animal rescue both have very heavy emotional elements that I think people often forget about. Story 29. I would guess that all professions are challenging. There is a show called Dirty Jobs that highlights this. It would be interesting to experience other professions for a day. Teaching is very difficult on a daily basis. Once you develop relationships with the students, it can flow well, but students of any age are emotionally draining. It is very demanding to juggle administrative tasks and lesson planning when you have 150 teenagers interacting with you all day. Then you have to grade papers. I spend many evenings recharging. Story 30. Machinist, toolmaker, programmer. The general public has no idea how to transform raw materials into value-added products. Even fewer understand tolerance, what a proper fit is, and general mechanical work. Story 31. Being a referee at a high level in any sport is challenging. People are quick to criticize and believe there is no accountability, but they have no idea what it involves. Constant study and interpretation of rules are necessary. Your film is reviewed, and your future assignments depend on being nearly perfect. At the highest levels, you must tolerate significant coach abuse because their careers depend on their success, and they earn hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases. Social media and public criticism are excessive. Story 32. Teaching your children is challenging. You seem to struggle with parenting. I believe a child raised by lemurs might have better outcomes. That illustrates the difficulties you face as a parent. I offer no praise and hope you find guidance. Story 33. I'll say a lot of white-collar office jobs are harder than people think. Yes, all blue-collar jobs are physically stressful, but at the end of the day, you clock in and clock out. Office jobs, depending on your position, are an always-on-the-clock situation, even when you go on vacation. I have worked from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day for months, sometimes even on weekends. When I go on vacation, part of me is always dreading the piled-up work awaiting me. As someone else commented, burnout is severe. This is not to say it is harder or easier than blue-collar work, but it has its own hardships and will, in my opinion, affect your personal life more due to the burnout. Story 34. Retail. The work itself is not the problem. It is the people, customers, and employees if you are a manager. To quote another comment on this post, you are a different kind of tired after a long day. Story 35. Waiting tables. I understand the annoyance with tipping somewhat, but then again, dealing with customers is difficult, and you run around quite a bit keeping track of all the nonsense. The comments I see on the anti-tipping subreddit make me want to slap a manager sometimes. Story 36. Care means you become attached to people and watch them die. There was a man I really liked. His name was Brian. He had Parkinson's disease. He was extremely smart and loved nature and poetry. I slowly watched him fade away over the course of 7 months. I saw his family break down time and time again. Nothing is as heartbreaking as someone saying "Mom" or "Dad" and the parent not responding. Brian eventually became unable to eat or drink anything. He spent the last week of his life in bed making faint noises. That is just one of the many people who have died. Story 37. Most people base their expertise on what a teacher does on their experience as a student. They think teachers just roll into class, sit down, and things happen. They do not see the preparation required beforehand, the scaffolding and differentiation during the lesson, the grading afterward, reports, parent communication, and more. It is a significant time commitment. Also, the common belief that teachers get summers off is incorrect. Summers are unpaid, and the summer break is about 13 weeks long. No school in the United States has 13 weeks off in the summer. Story 38. Public school teaching. Students hate you. Parents hate you. Administration hates you. The local, state, and national government hate you. The voting public hates you. There are some exceptions, of course. Story 39. Writer or author. The field is very hit or miss, and most have to pick up side jobs to make extra money. Story 40. Making individual chocolates is more technical than it appears at first glance, requiring a good understanding of chemistry. Cooking, in general, involves chemistry and can be more difficult than expected. It is also physically demanding. Story 41. Lineman. It is much easier than it used to be with advances in tools and equipment, but people still cannot make the cut. That only shows that the great-grandfather lineman had it really tough. Story 42. I would say most professions are harder than people think in one way or another, except the ones that people think are really hard. Rocket scientist, lawyer, brain surgeon. That one is probably still more difficult than it sounds. I would say something dealing with death, like cemetery landscaper, is probably a lot more difficult than most people would ever think. Story 43. Childcare. I do not work in this area, but seeing what some of these women have to handle, constant surveillance to ensure children are mentally stimulated without doing anything that can harm themselves, is impressive. Additionally, there are the constant shifts in the emotions of young children. It is an incredibly stressful environment, and this stress multiplies when there are more children involved. Story 44. Fast food. I have worked as a laborer in the oil field. I have worked in the mines of northern Minnesota where it gets 30 degrees below zero regularly. I have been a roofer and I have been a criminal. None of those professions compare to my time in a fast food kitchen. It is very difficult, my friend. Story 45. I bet dentistry is hard on the back and neck. You have to be on all the time when working in hospitality, and there is very little room for error with the minuscule scale of the work. Plus, there are stresses from running a business. I used to think my dentist just checked the hygienist's work, but they perform many different procedures. Story 46. Cashier. The actual work of ringing up groceries, packing bags, and so on is boring. The interesting part is the people you meet, but it is exhausting being on stage for several hours per shift and displaying a mood you might not always feel. Sometimes, I did not know what to say to someone unloading their bad day on me except, "I hope I helped your day go better by being efficient at my job, sir or ma'am." Story 47. Honestly, all of them. If there is one thing I have seen consistently, it is that people look around at other professions and think, "I would be making more money for less effort if I had just studied subject X and gotten a job in industry Y." It is almost never true. Every job and profession has its challenges, and if something is easy, you are not going to make any money at it because it is easy. Story 48. Most would not think of teaching as easy, but I have more than one relative who thought that all you have to do is read from the teacher edition in order to teach. By the way, if you think kindergarten is all play, those teachers earn their money and then some. Teaching a child to read is just about the closest thing to actual sorcery. Story 49. Court reporting is much harder than people think because it demands intense focus, fast reflexes, and complete accuracy under pressure. Reporters must capture every word spoken, often through overlapping speech, heavy accents, or emotional testimony, while applying perfect punctuation and grammar in real time. The job requires mastering legal vocabulary, multitasking with complex technology, and staying composed during long, high-stakes proceedings. There is no room for error, no breaks during testimony, and no do-overs. Just relentless precision in service of the official legal record. Story 50. I am not a nurse, but after seeing them in action, at least in the United States, in hospital locations working 12 to 14 shifts with no breaks, it is actually cruel regardless of the pay. Story 51. Anything that gets classified as a low-skill job. Even if the task itself is simple, employers are not unaware, so they will find a way to make that simple task difficult to get the most labor out of you. Serving a single table is relatively simple, and almost anyone can probably manage it. Juggling service for 15 tables without making mistakes is not something just anyone can do. Taking a fast food order or checking out items at a register is easy. Doing it while automatically having every transaction timed for performance evaluations makes it hard. Even when dealing with menial tasks, employers always try to push people to their limits, which makes the actual job more difficult than the simplicity of the task itself would suggest. Story 52. As a heavy goods vehicle driver, I feel people are quick to judge your mistakes but often get flustered by relatively minor amounts of stress on the road that heavy goods vehicle drivers experience. Not everyone is under public scrutiny every minute of every day while doing their job. There is much more to the job than people realize. One of the hardest parts is the long periods of time spent sitting still, alone, away from friends and family. Mentally, it is basically solitary confinement with added stress, responsibility, and sometimes a hostile public that treats you as a big inconvenience. I sometimes feel like I am going back to a prison cell each week. Story 53. Pretty much any job is harder than it looks to someone who has never done it. I have done many different kinds of work, and all of them had their challenges. Story 54. Police, fire, and emergency medical services. Everyone criticizes first responders thinking, "I would have done it differently." In most cases, 99% of people would literally crumble when faced with an actual emergency. Story 55. 911 dispatcher. My wife had to listen to a 911 caller blow his brains out with a shotgun. One of her coworkers took a call about a child at the bottom of a pool. It was her child. He survived as well. Story 56. Teaching. Everyone thinks they can do it, but when they realize how hard it is and how little it pays, they would quit in a heartbeat. Story 57. Being a primary care physician, people do not realize how much goes on behind the scenes, especially if you are running your own private practice. The medical decision-making is already more complex than people realize. On top of that, you have to manage running your own business, dealing with insurance companies, referrals, imaging, medication prior authorizations, phone callbacks, and more. Story 58. I am very senior in my field now, but I still insist that the hardest job I have ever had was washing dishes in a restaurant when I was 16. Story 59. Foster care in the United Kingdom has incredibly high standards with extensive training. It involves providing care in your home without time off, offering round-the-clock support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Some children have complex trauma and needs, often displaying challenging behaviors, including sexual or violent actions. This is before considering mental health issues or special educational needs requirements. Many foster carers in the United Kingdom experience burnout, and there are not nearly enough beds or placements available for children. Story 60. Emergency room doctor. Anyone who comes to you is in distress and essentially putting their lives in your hands. Their loved ones who rush in are filled with panic and emotion. This cycle repeats every 10 minutes until your shift ends. Then you go home only to face the same challenges again tomorrow. Meanwhile, the people around you remain panicked and irrational. You may also experience verbal abuse and sometimes physical abuse. God forbid if you take 10 minutes to disconnect, recharge, and eat something because you are drained in every way. Story 61. Airline employee. Everything is timed to the absolute millisecond. All the well-being is ignored, and employees are screamed at and abused by passengers. Then there is the weather. Story 62. Landscaping. I have only been in the field a few months, but it has been the hardest work I have ever done. I have also worked in retail as a chef, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning technician, mechanic, and in construction. Story 63. Running a restaurant. I used to help my significant other once in a while in my spare time with just that, taking orders and working at the register. I work in healthcare. At lunchtime, I wished I was back at the emergency room. Crazy stress. Story 64. Being a pediatric dental hygienist involves 1 or sometimes 2 appointments every 30 minutes in a corporate setting. Take x-rays, perform a complete cleaning, and have the doctor conduct an exam within 30 minutes. If the child is hysterical or has a developmental disability requiring 15 minutes of de-escalation, you still have 30 minutes. If the cleaning is not perfect, even though you spent half the appointment earning the child's trust, expect the doctor to criticize your work. Story 65. Remember all those people who had to work during coronavirus disease 2019. Let's start with those jobs. People whose production capacity actually is essential. Story 66. All professions are harder than people think. If you have not experienced them yourself, you have no idea. Story 67. Not even considered a profession, but I feel like that's part of the point. Full-time parent, also known as stay-at-home parent or homemaker. Some people really do think that means you just sit around watching TV. People don't understand how absolutely filthy a home gets when you don't have someone cleaning it, let alone thinking you can just sit around relaxing while the children run around doing whatever. People don't consider everything that goes into household and family management, such as doctor's appointments and dealing with insurance. These individuals often get basically no time off from this job. They might be breastfeeding or bottle feeding every 3 hours for a baby who won't sleep, while another child comes in the door saying, "I threw up." Story 68. I worked at CarMax for 9 years before working on my own. We had to do full details, bumper to bumper, engine and everything. That buffer gets heavy after the 5th detail. Applying the ceramic coating is fairly easy, but like you said, everything else is hard work. Good hard work, but hard work nonetheless. Story 69. Working from home takes a toll that people do not see. Sometimes I will run out to mail something and realize that I have not left the house for 4 days aside from walking my dog. That takes a toll, but it is like a gradual erosion. Can also make work-life balance difficult. By far the hardest thing about it is realizing that despite what I have always thought about myself, I get starved for human contact. I catch myself chatting with cashiers like I am my mother. Story 70. I was a Hot Wheels kid, so I love working with cars. Detailing is actually fun until you have to deal with pet hair and sand. Story 71. Cashiering can be exhausting if you are standing all day and being sociable, along with the other duties associated with it. Story 72. Everyone thinks their job is the hardest job and views other jobs as easy. The truth is every job has some challenging aspects, but that does not mean the job is actually hard. Story 73. Just about every profession is harder than people think. People have a strangely distorted idea of how easy things are, except perhaps professional athletics. Story 74. Anything involving a wide range of clients and attitudes. What works well for one client may offend another. Any job requiring high-level social skills, especially if it includes a technical component. You must be able to explain the process to every client you encounter. Story 75. Logging, fishing, farming, trucking and transport, quarrying and construction have high rates of non-fatal work-related injuries and fatal injuries. These industries involve rough working conditions, long work weeks, and extended working hours. Workers are often exposed to extreme heat, cold, rain, and wind. They frequently do not receive adequate safety training or sufficient protective gear. Pay can be low, benefits limited, and better-paid jobs are often located far from home and family for extended periods. Story 76. According to Elon Musk, designing a rocket that does not catastrophically malfunction. According to Donald Trump, bringing peace to the world. According to Vladimir Putin, conquering Ukraine. According to Rachel Reeves, balancing the books. According to Keir Starmer, stopping the boats. Every profession is harder than it looks when you are not good at it. Story 77. Epoxy floor coatings require accurate measurements and proper distribution. 100% thorough preparation, experience, and the ability to work quickly when situations become challenging. Story 78. A dishwasher in a restaurant. No matter how skilled, how fast, well-intentioned, or clever you think you are, more and more dirty dishes keep coming, and this never stops. It is very demoralizing. Story 79. Fast food in information technology for a franchise, and when I am on site, those people are working very hard but are not getting paid very much. To be fair, people think profit margins are higher than they are. Costs are actually quite high. Story 80. My first job after college was cashier, then the shelf stocker at CVS. It was difficult because it was boring. 8 hours felt like 24. Story 81. Tradespeople. A lot of people nowadays are saying, I think I will be a tradesperson. It's like they identify as tradespeople before applying for and getting an apprenticeship. It is the hardest time to learn and the most repetitive job for some. Story 82. Anybody who works with fiberglass, insulation, auto body, or composites can imagine working with stinging metal all day. Story 83. I know it may seem like everyone already knows how hard medicine is, but I think it is much harder than people realize, especially since many people, including politicians and older adults, seem to be practicing it. Story 84. Going to get criticized for this one, but being a good people manager is important. Don't get me wrong, it's not a difficult job, and in terms of physical effort, it is easy, but I think most people think managers just sit around all day and do nothing. Good managers plan, develop, remove roadblocks, and take care of issues behind the scenes. You have to navigate the work, the environment, and people's egos all day. It's not the hardest job by any means, but it is still harder than people think. Story 85. Farming is not just planting the seed, watering it, and then selling the crop. Farmers have knowledge of geology, meteorology, horticulture, soil composition, and more. They are skilled experts. Story 86. If by hard you mean physical labor, then I would say either apple picking or carpentry was the hardest work I ever did. I think roofing is probably harder. If not just physical, then for mental labor, being driven by an appraiser to produce reports for 80 hours a week was not easy. The military can take a pretty rough toll on your mental health. I found that difficult socially. The worst people and the best people in the world are in the military, in my opinion. Story 87. Welding is constant self-torture of the body from molten metal sparking and jumping like a fire missile, targeting any exposed flesh it can find. I hear the comments now. Wear your gloves, wear sleeves, use a leather blanket. If you welded daily, you would know there is no protection from molten metal sparks. Not to mention the harmful fumes, the black dust that fills your nostrils, and the inevitable burns from the flash. Still, it is pretty cool. I feel like a wizard melding metals together. Story 88. An automotive technician. No, we are not trying to rob you. No, I cannot just plug in my computer and magically find a fix for your car. No, I do not do this for fun. No, I do not set the labor rates. No, I cannot give you a discount. I will try my best to fix whatever problem you are having if you approve the work. Story 89 Management. It is easy to say they are unhelpful or do nothing because you do not understand what they do. They work long hours and receive calls 24/7. They get orders to implement difficult plans with no assistance and must filter misleading information from above. There are workers who make mistakes, sometimes creating escalated problems. They manage productivity goals, call-offs, terminations, and write-ups. Every worker on Reddit is seen as the ideal employee, and every manager is viewed negatively. In reality, management is a thankless and stressful job. Story 90. Delivering for Federal Express, United Parcel Service, United States Postal Service, or Amazon. Working 8 to 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. Then during peak times working solid 10 to 12-hour days for 3 months. Driving all day in heat, cold, or bad weather. Carrying 150-pound packages. Delivering to 5-story apartments if you are unlucky. Encountering rude people who may be aggressive because they feel they can get away with it since you do not want to lose your job. Facing strict deadlines in some cases. Story 91. Washing dishes at a busy Mexican restaurant. Waiters always complain about silverware, cheese baked on the plate, and refried bean soup that drains your energy while washing pots. Story 92. Repo truck driver. I work for a repossession company. A man was shot and killed a couple of years ago. He was trying to repossess a car, and the owner shot him. Story 93. Being a nanny involves little to no adult interaction. You raise other people's children and are often treated like help. People like to make jokes about playing with kids all day, but it is much more than that and very draining. I have a huge appreciation for stay-at-home moms because, at the end of the day, at least I get to give the kids back. Their job literally never ends. Story 94. Working as a pharmacy technician, 9 times out of 10, you are extremely short-staffed, and the job is much more than counting pills and placing a label on the bottle. Most Americans do not understand how their own insurance plans work. It is the worst job I have ever had. Story 95. Service advisor at an automotive repair shop. While not physically hard, it is mentally draining. Dealing with angry people all the time is harder than it seems. Story 96. Heavy lift forklift operator loading trucks and weight configurations. When the truck driver does not know and you do, it is an art. Story 97. I will always defer to public-facing customer service at a supermarket, electrical work for central air installation or maintenance at an apartment complex, and teaching 8th grade social studies. For every diminishing or demeaning comment you might have, I have at least 2 to 3 stories that will shut you down. Story 98. My wife works in a laboratory and the obstacles she has to overcome are intense. Often working over 60 hours a week, difficult clients, challenging human resources, they freeze promotions, lay off dozens of employees, increase the workload for the remaining staff, then complain that results are behind schedule. There are frustrating meetings about these results, labor costs, and other issues. It surprises me that people invest 4 years in education only to be treated this way. In comparison, I am a third-party contractor for a home improvement store. When they charge extra for delivery and installation, I am the person who arrives and completes the work. It is a lot of effort, but I would rather shingle a roof in 95-degree heat than struggle for a 3% raise once a year. Story 99. Field workers. Anyone picking fruit, vegetables, nuts, or cotton is impressive. That work is hard. I have spent a lot of time in the San Joaquin Valley, and those people are a different breed. They are the hardest workers you would ever meet. Not to mention intimidating. Try hanging out in a small-town bar during lettuce season. Those workers do not mess around. Definitely do not flirt with the bartender. Story 100. Public librarianship. This is especially important if you work in a branch with a significant homeless or transient population. Story 101. A somewhat ambitious person can fake enough to get by in many professions. Living in the real world without safety nets is the hardest part of existing. Story 102. Most jobs look easy until you understand what the person is considering and the skill involved. Story 103. Middle school and high school teaching is one of the most brutal, stressful, and unsupported professions. The metrics are unrealistic, the outcomes are non-existent, there is no financial freedom or opportunity, and burnout occurs much faster than in other professions. Story 104. Jobs that no one mentions when done well but receive endless complaints when done poorly. Dishwasher, janitor, trash collector. Someone's hard work goes into maintaining the health and cleanliness of the environments we live in. But society insists that while someone has to do it well, it won't be them. These jobs are undervalued, paid poorly, and expected to be done perfectly, with those who perform them unfairly regarded as lesser. Story 105. The easiest answer is everyone's job is harder than it seems. It really is, though. Your job could be something people think is simple, but it's because you put on a brave face every day and smile through the hardship. Story 106. I am going to say a poor professional golfer. You are good enough to have a tour card, but do not make the cut. You go home empty-handed after hotel, travel, and food expenses, not to mention training costs. The best of the worst 33 golfers on tour only made $55,000, and he probably spent $10,000 of that just to attend the 4 events he participated in. Story 107. Customer service agent. You will handle a large number of frustrated and angry customers and often receive complaints because your quality assurance score or average handling time is too low. Some jobs are more humane, but people who work for the outsourcing companies, insiders know what I mean, experience stress from both ends. Story 108. Airline ground handling. Every aircraft type has different handling procedures, and you must be able to know multiple procedures and switch quickly. Certain steps in the process are very time-sensitive and must be done at a specific time. Even if you are set up and ready early, you cannot perform them in advance. When you are in the cargo bin, you are crouched down at an awkward angle, throwing, lifting, and stacking bags of various weights and sizes. Story 109. Brewing, I love it, but it requires a lot of effort, science, and logistics. And cleaning, so much cleaning. It is not the homebrewer's fantasy. It is a food-safe factory. Story 110. Being a jockey or other professional horse rider requires significant fitness. The horse does not do all the work. These individuals are fit enough to run half marathons in their spare time, if they had any. Story 111. Most people think truck driving is just operating a large vehicle and dealing with common road problems. Many drivers appear tough and unrefined, leading some to believe it is a simple job. In reality, to succeed in trucking, you must plan your trips carefully, accounting for many factors including fuel stops and time management. You need to stay in constant communication with dispatchers and planners. At the same time, shippers often do not prioritize you and may keep you waiting for hours. You must track every detail of your pay because companies often try to avoid paying what is owed. The work is non-stop and challenging beyond description. Just when you think you have seen everything, new challenges arise. All this happens while spending little time at home and often working well over 60 to 70 hours a week. Story 112. Some people are not built for the banking world. Money and numbers can overwhelm a person, but when it is another person's money, you either understand it or you have to leave for the sake of your coworkers. Story 113. Honestly, everyone who is holding down the office of a franchise company acquired by ServiceMaster, operating out of someone's basement, submitting reports to the government for grants for energy efficiency with a boss who wakes up late, comes downstairs to the basement where you work and ruins everything. But seriously, any office administration job often requires working a lot of unpaid overtime. If you deal with the public, patients, or clients, that can be stressful. Casual sexual harassment is unfortunately common in many jobs. The office facade of happiness and pleasantness. The banter, pretending to care about people's children. Seeing twice 2-foot by 2-foot posters of scantily clad women at work. Having to handle all event planning, preparation, and general cleaning. Cleaning toilets when you were hired as a bookkeeper. Paying annually for your certification in a different field than bookkeeping, which you are not using but cannot let lapse. Having to call your boss when you arrive at work. Having to call your boss every time you need their authenticator password. Every time, despite having worked there for a while. Story 114. Futures trading is very difficult, especially the ability to control and maintain your emotions and mindset. As soon as you allow any emotion in, you may as well close your trade because you are likely going to lose money. Story 115. Sales has been working on straight commission for 24 years. The average person lasts 1 year. There are many ups and downs. It is mentally challenging, and dealing with people is never easy. Story 116. Bartending is very hard. Long nights, stress on body and mind, drinking, and more. But wait staff, that is unethical income. Story 117. Fast food. I do not know how it is now since it has been over 10 years since I have worked at a fast food restaurant. But it is very difficult. It is extremely hot. Everyone dislikes you, you work 10 to 12-hour shifts, and you are practically paid very little. Horrible. Story 118. Now, I am not saying that being a librarian is hard, but I certainly do not get to read all day, and I have heard people say that is what they think we do. No. Story 119. Forklift operator. Some people can't understand that the back wheels turn, allowing for a tighter turnaround. Also, common sense when driving seems to go out the window at any intersection. Story 120. Watching paint dry. Time starts moving slower. The smell starts messing with your head. It can become hard to see which area has dried by sight alone. You check with your hand, and now you have paint on your fingertips, which ends up on your clothes. Now you have also left your fingerprint on the wall. You try to run, but the law will catch you. Death is the only escape. Story 121. I always find it funny when people say, I guess I'll just become a stripper then, as if they have the cardio and core strength to do even the most basic pole routines. Story 122. Janitor or custodian. Everyone wants things to be clean, but not when they have to use the restroom because then you are seen as the enemy. Story 123. Architects are required to consistently create innovative solutions that have never been conceived before, often despite inadequate compensation. Story 124. Supply chain procurement is much more complex than simply adding items to a cart and placing an order. Story 125. Any job involving working with children, especially in a domestic setting. Parents are often very challenging. Story 126. Sales and business development. Some people think I get paid for taking people to lunch or doing nothing, but they never consider why our customers choose to do business with us instead of one of our 10 competitors. Story 127. Chef. Based on my 37+ years in the profession, some of us make it look easy. That does not mean that it is. Unfortunately, many are hacks, and that makes it harder on the professionals. My whole life, nobody respected my need to stay home on holidays and not travel hours to see them. They simply never heard me telling them how hard I worked or did not believe me. In the meantime, I am broke at 57 years old because pay and most bosses are poor. Working in a superheated room with no air conditioning, dripping in sweat, constantly moving and lifting heavy things, using knives, getting burned, surrounded by dangerous objects, having to flex your brain while being patient with difficult people and children is taxing. And then summer comes. Story 128. Ordered a curbside pickup for 10 40-bottle packs at Sam's today. I was fully expecting to load it myself and told the employee, "Don't worry, I got it." That person was loading the back of my truck at lightning speed with a smile. I have no idea if their job requires them to load vehicles, but if it does, that is hard work. It is about 100 degrees every day during these summer months. I gave him a tip. Story 129. Academics have many different responsibilities and often work in highly competitive fields, making it difficult to prioritize skill development. Story 130. While not really too hard, it is harder than the client thinks. Espresso machine repair is challenging. It is not like I invested hundreds of dollars in tools, probably a lot more since tools break, and spent hundreds of hours reading thousands of pages of manuals, schematics, and diagrams for all sorts of machines. But yes, sure, I charge too much. Maybe do not buy a $30,000 machine then. Dumas. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.